Suppose that you want to create a frequency distribution for this data set. First, you have to find the class width, which is the maximum minus the minimum divided by the number of classes, where the maximum is the largest number in the data set. Here we have 30.2. The minimum is the smallest number in the data set, that's 13.4. And then divided by the number of classes, which in this example is 6 classes. Then once you do this computation, you get 2.8, and you're going to round up to the nearest whole integer, which is equal to 3. So even if this was a 2.0001, you're still going to round up to the nearest whole integer, which is 3, to make sure that all of the data is going to fit into the categories that you create. So let's go ahead and make the classes the categories. So in order to find the classes, the first value is going to be the first lower class limit, which is the smallest number in the data set. But if you have a decimal, make sure that you truncate it. So for the classes, we're going to begin with 13, since 13.4 was the smallest number, but because it's a decimal, we truncate it, meaning get rid of the decimal, and get 13. So we need 6 of these classes, so that's the first one, the second, third, the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth one. Then we're going to come up with the frequencies as well. So the second lower class limit is going to be 13 plus a 3, that gives me 16. Then you take 16 plus a 3, that gives me 19. 19 plus a 3 is 22. 22 plus 3, 25. And then 25 plus a 3 is going to give you 28. To find the first upper class limit, find the number that's before 16, so that gives me a 15. Number before 19 gives you 18. Number before 22 gives you 21. Number before 25 gives you 24. And the number before 28 gives you 27. And then for the last one, take the 27 and add the class width. So 27 plus a 3 gives you a 30. Because my original data set had values after the decimal, we're going to go and write a 0.9 after each of these values in the upper class limits. So if there was one number after the decimal, put one of these 9s. If there's 2 numbers after the decimal in the original data set, put 2 9s. If there's 3 numbers after the decimal in the original data set, you're going to put 3 of these 9s. For the frequency, count how many of these values are under each of the categories. So for the first one, you have 4. For the second one, you would have 2. For the third one, you have 2. For the next one, you would have 0. For the next one, you have 1. For the next one, you would have 1. In order to find these frequencies, you could have created a tally for each of the numbers in the original data. So for example, for the 25.1, it fits into the second to last category, 30.2, last category, 15.8, first category, 14.2, first category, 13.5, first category, 18.5, second category, 18.9, second category, 13.4, first category, 20.7, third category, and 21.1, third category also. You count the tallies, and that gives you the frequencies. Now, if you wanted to create a histogram using the graphing calculator, first come up with your x-axis and y-axis scales. So first we're going to come up with our scales. So on the x-axis, we're going to need 6 classes. So this is a first class, that's a second class, third class, fourth class, fifth class, and the last one is our 6th class. Our classes, I just call them classes. You could have called them number of seconds or time holding breath. So I'm going to still keep classes on the x-axis. Then we're going to label the classes themselves for each of these categories, or we're going to label the lower class limits for each of these marks, or we're going to label the boundaries if you wanted to, or you could label the midpoints if you wanted to in between each of the classes. So I'm just going to use what we had here in the table, the 13 to 15.9, 16 to 18.9, 19 to 21.9, 22 to 24.9, and 25 to 27.9, and the last one is 28 to 30.9. Then for the y-axis, find the highest frequency. The highest frequency is a 4, and come up with a scale based on that highest frequency. So I'm going to go by ones, and then I'm going to end at 4. So the y-axis again is the frequency. Then if you wanted to do this on the graphing calculator, go to stat and go to enter on edit. Then under 01 we're going to type in the data. So we have 25.1, 30.2, 15.8, 14.2, 13.5, 18.5, 18.9, 13.4, 20.7, and 21.1. Once you're done putting the data under the table, go to second and go to stat plot. Hit enter on the first one. If it's on off, make sure that you click on enter to turn it on. Go down to the type, and then under the type we're going to go to the third category, which is a histogram. Hit enter on the histogram. Make sure that the X list says L1. Frequency should also be 1. Then we're going to go to window, and under the window we're going to tell the calculator where my x-axis should begin, where it should end, what's the scale that it should be using, what's the y minimum, what's the y maximum, and what's the scale that we should be using for the y-axis. Don't change any of these last three. So going back to the x minimum, we're going to go ahead and write in a 13. So it's going to be the smallest number in our x-axis that we created. So this is x minimum. Then this is going to be the x maximum. It's just the largest upper class limit. X scale is going to be our class width. And then y minimum, it's always going to be 0. And the y maximum just depends on what's the highest number that you went to on your y-axis. So x minimum we said was 13, hit enter. Then x maximum is 30.9. And then the x scale is equal to a 3. Y minimum, it's always going to be 0. Y maximum is equal to 4. And then y scale, since we went by ones, we're going to leave this at 1. And then click on graph. The table or the histogram that you would create by hand should match the histogram that you create on the graphing calculator. But you can use this to check your answers both on the table and on your paper on the histogram. So click on trace. You'll see that the n is equal to 4 for the first category. First category says minimum of 13, maximum less than 16. So our first category was 13, and the largest number in that category was less than 16, in this case 15.9, with a frequency of 4. So this n corresponds to the frequency in our table. If you scroll to the right, you'll see that there's a frequency of 2 in the second category, just like we had here. We had a frequency of 2 in the second category. Then we have a frequency of 2 for the third category, which matches what we have on the table. Frequency of 0 for the next category, which matches again on the table. Frequency of 1, and that gives me a frequency of 1 on the table. Frequency of 1 on the graphing calculator also gave me a frequency of 1 on the table.